The massive doors of the Galactic War Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the hall. Admiral Taemin stepped inside, his black uniform crisp and clean against the gleaming metal walls of Nexus Prime Station. Behind him walked three other humans, all wearing the same serious expression that had become common among their species during council meetings. The chamber was huge, with seats arranged in a perfect circle around a glowing blue hologram table. Each seat was designed for a different alien species. Some were filled with water for the fish-like hydros. Others had special heating units for the cold-blooded Velkari. The crystalline Keth needed platforms that could support their heavy, rock-like bodies. Taemin took his seat and looked around the room. 12 different alien species were represented here today. Each one looked different from the others. The Velkari had smooth gray skin and large black eyes. The hydros breathed through gills and spoke through translation devices that made bubbling sounds. The Alterans were tall and proud, with golden skin that seemed to glow. The Kreks looked like walking tanks, with thick armor covering their bodies. All of them were staring at the humans. Ambassador Rixtal of the Velkari stood up first. His voice was calm but firm when he spoke. "We are here today to discuss Protocol 447B. This rule says that only humans can work alone in war zones. All other species must have escorts or partners. We think this is not fair." The Hydro's representative made angry bubbling sounds through his translator. "Humans get special treatment. Why? We have fought in wars too. We have lost soldiers too. Why can't we work alone like humans?" The Keth delegate made a deep humming sound that filled the room. Their translator converted it to words. "This protocol makes no sense. All species should have equal rights in battle." Taemin listened quietly. He had heard these complaints many times before. Every few months, someone would bring up Protocol 447B and demand to know why humans were different. The truth was, something most species didn't want to hear. The Alteran representative stood. Next, Prince Valdris was tall and golden, with the bearing of someone born to command. "The Alteran Warrior Code teaches us that all honorable fighters should stand as equals. This human privilege goes against everything we believe." More voices joined in. The Kreks berserker Gorthak slammed his armored fist on his seat. "Kreks strong, Kreks fight good. Why humans special?" Soon the chamber was filled with angry voices. 12 different species all demanding the same thing. They wanted the right to work alone in war zones, just like humans. They saw it as an honor, a sign of trust from the Galactic Coalition. They had no idea what they were really asking for. Admiral Taemin stood up slowly. The chamber fell quiet. When humans spoke in these meetings, everyone listened. Not because they had to, but because they had learned to respect human judgment in matters of war. "You want to know about Protocol 447B, Taemin said. His voice was steady and calm. "Very well. Captain Sora will explain." A woman in her 30s stood up from the human delegation. Captain Sora had short black hair and scars on her hands from old battles. She had been fighting for the Coalition for over 10 years. Her record was perfect. Every mission successful, every objective completed. She looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at her. Some looked curious, others looked angry. All of them expected her to defend human superiority, to explain why humans deserved special treatment. Instead, she said something that surprised everyone. "You don't want what we have. Trust me." The chamber erupted again. The Velkari ambassador stood up quickly. What does that mean? Explain yourself, human. The Hydro's representative bubbled angrily. Typical human arrogance, always speaking in, riddles. But Prince Valdris held up a golden hand. The Alteran looked thoughtful. Wait, Captain Sora, what exactly do you mean? Sora was quiet for a long moment. She looked tired, like someone who had seen too much and carried too many burdens. You think Protocol 447B is a privilege? You think it means the Coalition trusts us more than you? You're wrong. She paused and looked directly at each alien representative. Protocol 447B exists to protect you, not to reward us. The chamber was silent now. Even the usually angry Krex Berserker had stopped making noise. Protect us from what? Ambassador Reddit-style asked. His voice was quieter now, more careful. Sora smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was sad and tired. From becoming what war requires you to become, from making the choices that war forces you to make, from doing what needs to be done when there are no good options left. The Keth hummed in confusion. Their translator struggled to convert the complex emotional content. We do not understand. Admiral Taemin stood up again. Honored delegates, you have demanded answers about Protocol 447B. Very well. We will give you those answers. But first you must understand the history behind this rule. He gestured to the hologram table in the center of the room. It flickered to life, showing star maps and battle reports. 15 years ago, during the Outer Rim Wars, we fought together for the first time against the Devourers. Do you remember what happened? Several aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Outer Rim Wars were not pleasant memories for anyone. We will review the archived footage, Taemin continued. We will examine the psychological reports. We will interview the survivors. When we are done, you will understand why Protocol 447B exists. He looked around the room one more time. And you will understand why humans are the only species allowed to walk alone in war zones. Not because we are better than you, but because we are the only ones willing to pay the price that war demands. The chamber fell silent. The alien delegates looked at each other with growing unease. They had come here demanding equal treatment. Now they were beginning to suspect that some kinds of equality were not worth having. Ambassador Reddit-style spoke first. Very well. Show us these archives. Show us why humans are different. Admiral Taemin nodded. Session adjourned. We reconvene tomorrow to review the Outer Rim Incident archives. I warn you all, what you are about to see will change how you think about war and about us. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Captain Sora remained in her seat. She stared at the hologram table, now showing images from the Outer Rim Wars. Images of horror and death and choices no one should have to make, she whispered to herself. They have no idea what they're asking for. The War Council chamber was darker today. The lights had been dimmed to make viewing the archive footage easier. Admiral Taemin stood beside the large hologram projector while the alien delegates took their seats. They all looked nervous. None of them were sure they wanted to see what the humans were about to show them. What you are about to witness, Taemin began, happened 15 years ago during the first joint coalition operation against the Devourers. This was before Protocol 447B existed. All species fought together as equals. The hologram flickered to life. It showed a planetary surface covered in twisted black structures that looked like giant spider webs. The sky was dark red, and strange organic towers reached up toward the clouds. "This is Kepler 442b, Taman explained. "A human colony world with 2 million civilians. The Devourers had been there for 3 weeks when the Joint Rescue Force arrived." Ambassador Reddit-style leaned forward in his seat. "We remember this battle. Many good soldiers died there." "Yes," Taman said quietly. "They did." The footage changed to show the inside of a coalition transport ship. Different alien species sat together in the cargo bay, checking their weapons and preparing for battle. Velkari soldiers with their sleek energy rifles, Alteran warriors in golden armor, Krex berserkers sharpening their massive claws, and in one corner, a small group of human soldiers sitting quietly. "Sergeant Dong Hyun, 3rd Human Infantry," Taman pointed to a young man cleaning his rifle. He was 24 years old. This was his first joint operation. The footage showed the transport landing on the planet's surface. The doors opened and the joint force stepped out into a nightmare. The Devourers were unlike anything the non-human species had ever seen. They looked like giant insects mixed with rotting flesh. They moved in perfect coordination, like a single organism with many bodies. Their mouths were full of teeth that never stopped moving, always hungry. The first contact went badly. The footage showed a Velkari soldier freezing in terror when a Devourer jumped at him. The creature was making horrible sounds, like screaming, and laughing at the same time. The Velkari dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, unable to move. Prince Valdris had been there that day, leading a squad of Alteran warriors. The footage showed him trying to maintain formation as his soldiers began to break ranks. "Honorable combat," he could be heard saying. "Remember your training." But the Devourers didn't fight with honor. They fought like animals, tearing at anything that moved. The Krex berserkers fared better at first. Their natural aggression seemed like a good match for the brutal enemy. But as the battle went on, something went wrong. The footage showed Gorthak, younger then but just as large, standing over the body of a fallen comrade. The Devourer had eaten the Krex soldier while he was still alive. Gorthak began to scream and didn't stop for 3 hours. Psychological breakdown. Dr. Haywan's voice came through the speakers. She was providing commentary on the archived footage. The Krex mind is built for simple, direct aggression. When faced with true horror, they become unable to function. The camera switched to another part of the battlefield. A group of Hydro's soldiers had found a human civilian who had been partially consumed by the Devourers but was still alive. The sight of the half-eaten human begging for death sent the aquatic aliens into complete shock. They stood motionless in their environmental suits, unable to process what they were seeing. "Each species had a breaking point," Dr. Haywan continued. "The Velkari shut down when faced with incomprehensible threats. The Alterans couldn't function when their honor code provided no guidance. The Krex lost themselves to rage and became useless. The Hydros couldn't cope with extreme suffering." The footage changed again. Now it showed Sergeant Dong Hyun and his human squad. They had been separated from the main force during the chaos. Surrounded by Devourers in an abandoned building, they should have been dead. Instead, they were working. The humans moved with calm efficiency. When a Devourer burst through the wall, Private Yejin shot it 3 times and immediately turned to find the next threat. When Dong Hyun saw civilians trapped in a room with no way out except through a swarm of enemies, he didn't hesitate. He threw a grenade into the swarm and led the civilians to safety while the creatures were still burning. There was no panic, No freezing in terror, no uncontrolled rage, just soldiers doing their job. The most disturbing moment came when the humans found a nest of devourer eggs, hundreds of them, each one containing a future monster that would consume entire planets if allowed to hatch. The other species might have tried to find another way. They might have looked for a solution that didn't involve destroying what looked like helpless babies, even if those babies were monsters. Private Yejin picked up a plasma grenade and walked into the nest. The footage showed her face clearly in those final moments. She was smiling. "Tell my mom I made it count," she said into her radio. Then she detonated the grenade. The explosion killed 30 adult devourers and destroyed the entire nest. Yejin died instantly, but she had saved thousands of lives. The alien delegates watched in silent horror. Not horror at the devourers, but horror at the humans, at how easily they made impossible choices, at how they could smile while walking into certain death. The footage continued for another hour. It showed human soldiers doing things that needed to be done, but should never have to be done. They shot human civilians who had been infected with devourer larvae, ending their suffering before they could become monsters. They destroyed entire city blocks to stop the spread of the infestation, knowing that families might still be hiding in those buildings. And through it all, they remained calm. Professional, almost cheerful. The joint operation was considered a success, Admiral Taman said as the footage ended. "We saved over 1 million civilians and eliminated the devourer threat on Kepler 442b. He paused and looked around the chamber. But half of the non-human soldiers required immediate psychological treatment. 20% never returned to active duty. The Valkyrie squad leader spent 6 months in a medical facility, unable to speak." Ambassador Reddit-style was very quiet when he spoke. "And the human soldiers?" "They filed their reports and requested immediate reassignment to the next battle zone," Taman replied. "Sergeant Dong-hyun is now Colonel Dong-hyun. He has participated in over 40 major operations since then." The Hydro's representative made soft bubbling sounds. His translator was having trouble with the emotional content. How? How can they do these things and remain functional? Dr. Hae-won appeared on the hologram, recorded years earlier during her psychological evaluation of the returning soldiers. "That question led to the creation of Protocol 447b, she said. "We needed to understand what made humans different, why they could function in situations that broke other species completely." The Keth delegate hummed softly. "And what did you discover?" The hologram showed brain scans and psychological profiles. "Humans possess a unique combination of traits," Dr. Hae-won explained. "They can compartmentalize extreme experiences without losing emotional connection to their fellow beings. They can make morally ambiguous decisions without psychological paralysis. Most importantly, they can accept necessary evils without becoming evil themselves." Prince Valdris spoke carefully. "You are saying that humans are naturally suited for this kind of warfare?" "Not naturally," Dr. Hae-won corrected. "Humans have the capacity to become suited for it. But there is a price." The chamber fell, silent. Everyone was thinking about what they had seen, the humans sitting calmly while making horrible choices, the way they could smile while walking into death. Finally, Ambassador Reddit-style spoke. "We came here demanding equal treatment. Now we are not sure we want it." Admiral Tae-min nodded. "That is wisdom, Ambassador. True wisdom." The session ended quietly. As the alien delegates filed out, Many of them looked at the human representatives differently. Not with anger or resentment, but with something that might have been pity. Captain Sora remained in her seat, just as she had the day before. She was staring at the now empty hologram projector. "They're starting to understand," Admiral Taemin said to her. "Are they?" Sora replied. "Because I'm not sure I understand it myself anymore." Dr. Haywan stood in her laboratory on Nexus Prime, surrounded by screens showing brain scans and behavioral data. She had spent 3 years studying the psychological differences between humans and other coalition species. Her research had led directly to the creation of Protocol 447B, but even she sometimes struggled to understand what made humans so different. Today, representatives from the War Council were visiting her lab to see her work firsthand. Ambassador Rixtal walked slowly between the displays, studying the data with his large black eyes. Prince Valdris examined brain scan comparisons with obvious discomfort. Even the usually aggressive Gorthak seemed subdued in the sterile laboratory. Environment. "The question we needed to answer," Dr. Haywan began, "was simple. Why do humans function normally in extreme combat situations while other species suffer psychological breakdown?" She gestured to a series of brain scans on the wall. Different colors showed activity in various regions of alien brains during combat simulations. Each species processes stress and moral conflict differently. The Velkari brain shows massive overactivity in the analysis centers when faced with no-win scenarios. They become paralyzed by trying to find a perfect solution that doesn't exist. The Velkari brain scan was lit up like a Christmas tree, with bright red areas indicating extreme stress activity. "The Alteran response is different," Dr. Haywan continued, moving to another scan. "Their honor-based culture creates rigid neural pathways. When faced with situations that contradict their moral code, they experience severe cognitive dissonance." Prince Valdris studied his own species' brain scan with obvious discomfort. The golden alien's jaw was tight as he spoke. "You are saying our honor makes us weak?" "Not weak," Dr. Haywan replied gently. "Inflexible. Your honor code is a strength in many situations, but it becomes a limitation when war requires dishonorable actions to achieve honorable goals." She moved to the Krek's brain scan. The Krek's mind is built for simple, direct responses, fight or flee. When faced with complex moral choices, the cognitive load becomes too much. They either shut down completely or lose themselves to uncontrolled rage. Gorthak growled softly as he looked at his species scan. "Krek's not stupid. Krek's just different." "Exactly," Dr. Haywan agreed. "Different. Not better or worse, just different. And those differences matter in combat situations." She led the group to a new section of the lab where a human volunteer was waiting. Corporal Jae-sung sat calmly in a chair connected to monitoring equipment. He was young, maybe 25, with the same quiet confidence that seemed common among human soldiers. Corporal Jae-sung has volunteered to participate in a combat simulation alongside representatives from other species, Dr. Haywan explained. "We will monitor their responses to increasingly difficult moral scenarios." 3 other volunteers joined them. A Velkari scientist named Zektar, an Alteran warrior called Thyros, and a young Krex fighter named Braktal. Each was connected to monitoring equipment that would track their brain activity and stress responses. "The scenario is simple," Dr. Haywan announced. "You are part of a rescue team trying to save civilians from a hostile facility. You must make tactical decisions under pressure. There are no perfect solutions." The simulation began on the screens. around the lab. It showed a building under attack, with civilians trapped inside and enemy forces closing in. The volunteers had to choose how to proceed. The first decision point appeared quickly. Enemy soldiers were using civilian hostages as shields. How do you proceed? Zektar, the Valkyrie, immediately began analyzing multiple options. His brain scan showed intense activity as he tried to calculate the perfect solution. Minutes passed while he considered variables and possibilities. But time was running out in the simulation, and his delay was costing virtual lives. Thyros, the Alteran, struggled with the moral implications. His honor code demanded that he protect the innocent, but it also forbade him from causing civilian casualties. His brain scan showed the neural conflict as two core values fought against each other. Braktal, the Krex, chose direct action. He charged at the enemy position, but his simple approach led to disaster in the simulation. More civilians died because he couldn't adapt to the complex tactical situation. Jae-sung, the human, took a different approach. He studied the situation for exactly 15 seconds, then made his choice. He ordered a flanking maneuver that would result in some civilian casualties but would save the majority. His brain scan showed activity in decision-making areas, but no signs of stress or conflict. Interesting, Prince Valdris observed. The human made the same choice that I would consider dishonorable, but his brain shows no signs of moral distress. The simulation continued with more difficult scenarios. A building needed to be destroyed to stop enemy advancement, but civilians might still be inside. Chemical weapons were the only way to eliminate a biological threat, but they would poison the environment for years. Each time, the pattern repeated. The alien volunteers either became paralyzed by analysis, conflicted by moral considerations, or made choices that were tactically sound but strategically disastrous. Jae-sung consistently made the decisions that saved the most lives overall, even when those decisions involved accepting terrible costs. After the simulation ended, Dr. Haewon interviewed each participant. Zektar, how do you feel about your performance? The Valkyrie scientist shifted uncomfortably. I know I was too slow. I kept searching for a solution that would save everyone. But such solutions do not exist, do they? Thyros, what was your experience? The Alteran warrior looked troubled. I could not act when action required me to abandon my principles. Perhaps this makes me unsuitable for war. Braktal, the young Krex fighter, snarled softly. Simulation stupid. Real fight better. Krex smash enemies, save friends. Simple. And you, Corporal Jae-sung? The human shrugged. It was a tactical exercise. You assess the situation, identify your objectives, and choose the action most likely to achieve those objectives. Some choices are harder than others, but they're still just choices. Dr. Haewon nodded and turned to address the alien delegates. This is the fundamental difference. When faced with impossible moral choices, other species either break down or become something they're not. Humans simply adapt. She pulled up a comparison of the brain scans from the simulation. Look at the human pattern. High activity in problem-solving areas, normal stress responses, but no cognitive overload. The human brain treats moral complexity as just another variable to consider, not as an overwhelming burden. Ambassador Rixtal studied the scans carefully. But how? How can they ignore the moral weight of their choices? They don't ignore it, Dr. Haewon corrected. They accept it. There's a difference. She led them to her office, where she kept recordings of interviews with human soldiers who had participated in major battles. Listen to this, she said, playing a recording. Commander Subin's voice filled the room. She was a veteran of 12 major conflicts, and her record was flawless. People think we don't feel anything when we make hard choices. That's not true. We feel everything, but we've learned to carry that weight without letting it stop us from doing what needs to be done. The recording continued. Other species see war as either glorious or horrible. We see it as a problem to be solved. That's what scares them about us. Not that we're violent, but that we're calm about violence. Prince Valdris leaned back in his chair. This is why Protocol 447b exists. Not because humans are superior warriors, but because they can function as warriors without losing themselves. Exactly, Dr. Haywan confirmed. My research showed that humans have a unique psychological profile. They can compartmentalize extreme experiences while maintaining emotional connections to their comrades. They can make morally ambiguous decisions without psychological paralysis. Most importantly, they can accept necessary evils without becoming evil themselves. She pulled up her final report, the one that had led to the creation of Protocol 447b. I recommended that humans be granted autonomous war zone access not as a privilege, but as a burden that only they could bear without breaking. The alien delegates sat in silence, processing what they had learned. Finally, Gorthak spoke up. Humans carry weight that break others. This why they fight alone. Yes, Dr. Haywan replied. They fight alone because fighting together would break their allies. They bear the moral burden of necessary choices so that other species don't have to become what war requires you to become. Ambassador Rikstal stood up slowly. We came here thinking humans had unfair advantages. Now we understand they carry unfair burdens. As the delegates prepared to leave, Corporal Jae-sung remained connected to the monitoring equipment. Dr. Haywan noticed something interesting on his brain scan. Corporal, may I ask you something personal? Of course, Doctor. Do you ever wish you could respond to moral conflict the way other species do? Do you ever wish these choices were harder for you? Jae-sung was quiet for a long moment. When he finally answered, his voice was soft. Every day, Doctor. Every single day. The brain scan showed a flicker of activity in emotional centers that hadn't appeared during the simulation. For just a moment, the weight of his psychological burden was visible. Then it disappeared, compartmentalized away where it couldn't interfere with his ability to function. The alarm bells echoed through Nexus Prime Station with urgent, piercing sounds that made everyone stop what they were doing. Captain Taemin was in his quarters when the emergency call came through. 3 years had passed since Protocol 447b was officially established, and the galaxy had been mostly peaceful during that time. Now the Devourers were back. Multiple simultaneous attacks. Admiral Park's voice crackled through the communication system. 5 coalition worlds under assault. They've evolved new tactics, Captain. We need joint forces deployed immediately. Taemin rushed to the briefing room where other officers were already gathering. The large display screens showed star maps with red warning signals at 5 different locations: Haven's Rest, New Sol, Altera Prime, Krek's Stronghold, and Velkari Research Station Beta. How? Is this possible? Commander Subin asked as she studied the tactical data. We destroyed their homeworld 15 years ago. Apparently we missed some, Admiral Park replied grimly. Intelligence suggests they've been hiding in deep space, growing stronger and learning from our previous encounters. The room filled with representatives from different species as the emergency briefing began. This time, however, things were different. Protocol 447B was now in effect, which meant humans would lead all mixed-species operations in active war zones. "Captain Taman," Admiral Park announced, "you will command the rescue mission to Haven's Rest. It's a civilian colony with over 3 million inhabitants. The Devourers have been there for 6 hours." Taman nodded and looked at his assigned team. According to the new protocols, he would work with representatives from other species, but the final tactical decisions would be his alone. "Velkari Scout Xiphon reporting for duty," said a tall gray alien with scanning equipment attached to his arms. Xiphon was young for his species, maybe equivalent to a human 20-year-old, and this was his first joint operation. Alteran Warrior Prince. "Valdris ready for battle," announced the golden-skinned alien. Valdris had been at the Outer Rim Wars 15 years ago. He knew what the Devourers could do. "Krex Berserker Gorthak here," growled the massive armored alien. Gorthak was also a veteran of the previous war, though the experience had changed him in ways that weren't immediately obvious. "Sergeant Mi Young and Alpha Squad will provide human tactical support," Tae-min announced. Mi Young was a veteran with cold eyes and steady hands. Her squad of 6 humans would be the backbone of the operation. The transport ship reached Haven's Rest 12 hours after the first distress call. The planet looked wrong from orbit. Instead of the usual blue and green colors of a healthy world, large sections were now black and twisted. The Devourers had been busy. "Scanning for survivors," Xiphon reported, his equipment processing thousands of data points every second. "I'm detecting large groups of civilians in the underground shelters, but the surface structures are changed." The landing was rough. Devourer organisms had grown across the spaceport, creating obstacles that made normal docking impossible. The ship had to set down in a field outside the main city. As soon as the doors opened, the team could see that this was not going to be like the previous war. The Devourers had evolved. "They're using the buildings," Prince Valdris observed with obvious dismay. "They've turned the human structures into part of their hive." The colony's skyscrapers were now covered in organic material that pulsed with alien life. What had once been windows were now openings for devourer creatures to emerge from. The aliens had learned to use human architecture against the humans. "New tactics," Tae-min confirmed. "They're not just consuming the world anymore, they're converting it." The first encounter came within minutes of landing. A group of Devourers emerged from what had been a shopping center, but these creatures looked different from the ones they had fought before. They moved more intelligently, using cover and coordinated attacks instead of just charging forward. Xiphon immediately began analyzing the new enemies, his scanner working overtime to understand their capabilities. But analysis took time, and the creatures were closing in fast. "Xiphon, report!" Tae-min called out. "I'm detecting 17 different subspecies," Xiphon replied, his voice tight with concentration. "They have specialized roles now. Some are scouts, others are heavy assault units, and there appear to be command variants that coordinate the others." While Xiphon analyzed, Prince Valdris drew his ceremonial sword and prepared for honorable combat. But the Devourers didn't fight with honor. They used human children as living shields, infected with alien parasites that made them attack their own rescuers. "I cannot strike down innocents," Valdris said, his weapon trembling in his hands. "There must be another way. Gorthak had his own problems." The sight of children being used as weapons triggered memories from the previous war. The massive Krex began to shake with rage, but instead of focusing that rage on the enemy, he became unpredictable. He smashed through a wall, that the team needed for cover and nearly attacked Xiphon when the Velkari tried to scan one of the infected children. "Gorthak angry," the berserker roared. "Children hurt. Gorthak smash everything." Meanwhile, Sergeant Mi Young and her human squad operated with the same cold efficiency they had shown 15 years ago. When faced with infected children being used as weapons, Mi Young made the hard choice without hesitation. "Tranquilizer darts," she ordered her squad. "Non-lethal takedown. We'll deal with the parasites later." When Prince Valdris couldn't bring himself to fight enemies using civilian shields, Mi Young's team flanked around the building and eliminated the Devourers from behind. When Gorthak's uncontrolled rage became a liability, human soldiers calmly guided him away from critical tactical positions. The mission continued for 18 hours. Each challenge revealed the same pattern. The alien team members, despite their best intentions and considerable skills, couldn't adapt to the new Devourer tactics. Xiphon became paralyzed by analysis. Every time he thought he understood the enemy's capabilities, they revealed new adaptations. His need to gather complete information conflicted with the need for immediate action. "Captain, I need more time to analyze their behavioral patterns," Xiphon reported during a brief lull in the fighting. "If we could capture a live specimen—" "Xiphon, we don't have time," Taemin replied. "People are dying while you scan, Riswam." Valdris struggled with every tactical decision that conflicted with his honor code. When the optimal strategy required destroying a civilian building to cut off Devourer reinforcements, he couldn't give the order. "These were people's homes," he said, staring at the apartment complex that needed to be eliminated. "Families lived here, children played in these rooms. And more families will die if we don't act," Taemin pointed out. But Valdris couldn't reconcile the contradiction between protecting civilians and destroying civilian property. Gorthak's berserker rage made him dangerous to both enemies and allies. When he saw a devourer feeding on a human corpse, he lost control completely and charged into the middle of a carefully planned ambush, forcing the entire team to abandon their strategy to rescue him. Through it all, the human soldiers continued, working. They made the choices their alien allies couldn't make. When Valdris hesitated to destroy the apartment building, Mi Young calmly planted the charges herself. When Xiphon needed more data to make decisions, human soldiers provided tactical intelligence based on quick field assessments. When Gorthak's rage became uncontrollable, human team members managed the situation with patient professionalism. The worst moment came during the evacuation of a school shelter. 300 children were trapped underground, while devourers closed in from all directions. The only way to save them was to collapse the tunnel system behind them, but doing so would also trap 50 adult civilians who were still trying to reach the shelter. Xiphon ran calculations frantically, trying to find a solution that would save everyone. Prince Valdris stood frozen, unable to choose between saving 300 children and dooming 50 adults. Gorthak wanted to charge into the tunnel and fight the Devourers hand-to-hand, which would have resulted in everyone dying. Mi Young looked at the situation for exactly 10 seconds, then gave the order to collapse the tunnels. 50 adults died. 300 children lived. "How can you make that choice?" Prince Valdris asked her later, his golden face pale with shock. Mi Young's reply was simple and devastating. "Because someone has to." The mission was ultimately successful. They saved over 2 million civilians from Haven's Rest and eliminated the Devourer infestation. But the cost was clear. The alien team members were traumatized not by the enemy, but by watching humans make impossible decisions with steady hands and clear consciences. During the flight back to Nexus Prime, the alien soldiers sat in silence. Xiphon stared at his scanner without using it. Prince Valdris had cleaned his sword, but didn't seem to take any pride in it. Gorthak was quiet for the first time anyone could remember. Captain Taemin found Sergeant Mi-young sitting alone in the cargo bay, cleaning her rifle with the same methodical precision she brought to everything. "How do you do it?" he asked her. "How do you make these choices and still sleep at night?" Mi-young looked up at him with tired eyes. "Who says I sleep at night, Captain?" For the first time, Taemin realized that Protocol 447B wasn't just about protecting other species from becoming. The War Council chamber looked the same as it had weeks ago, but everything felt different now. The alien delegates sat in their specially designed seats, but their posture had changed. They no longer leaned forward with aggressive demands. Instead, they sat quietly, almost carefully, as if they were afraid of what they might learn next. Admiral Taemin stood at the center of the chamber, but he wasn't facing hostile questioners anymore. The mission to Haven's Rest had changed everything. The aliens had seen Protocol 447B in action, and they finally understood what it really meant. "Honored delegates," Taemin began, "3 weeks ago, you came here demanding equal treatment in war zones. You saw Protocol 447B as discrimination against your species. Today, I believe you understand the truth." Ambassador Rixtal spoke first, his voice much quieter than before. "We have seen the archived footage. We have observed the psychological testing. We have witnessed human tactical decisions in real, combat situations." He paused, searching for the right words. "We no longer question why humans operate alone in war zones. We question why humans are willing to bear this burden." The Hydro's representative made soft, bubbling sounds through his translator. "Our soldiers who participated in the Haven's Rest mission required extensive counseling, not because of enemy action, but because of human action. The choices humans make without hesitation." Prince Valdris stood up slowly. The Golden Alteran looked older somehow, as if the recent mission had aged him beyond his years. "I have fought in many battles. I have faced death with honor and courage, but watching humans make decisions that destroy their own souls to save others, this is a burden I cannot carry." Gorthak understand now. The massive Krex berserker said simply, "Humans not strong because they feel fear. Humans strong because they feel everything and fight anyway." Taemin nodded thoughtfully. "You have all learned something important. Protocol 447B was never about human superiority. It was about human sacrifice." He gestured to the holographic display, which showed casualty reports from recent missions. In the past 3 years, human forces have operated in 47 major combat zones. Our success rate is 94%. Our casualty rate is the lowest in coalition history. But there are other statistics we don't usually discuss. The display changed to show medical reports that made the alien delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. 68% of human combat veterans show signs of chronic stress disorders. 43% require ongoing psychological support. 89% report difficulty forming emotional connections after extended combat service. He looked around the chamber. "We pay a price for our effectiveness. We become very good at making terrible choices, but we don't become immune to the weight of those choices." Dr. Heywan appeared via hologram from her laboratory. "Honored delegates, my research has continued since our last meeting. I have made some disturbing discoveries about the long-term effects of combat stress on human psychology. She displayed brain scans that showed changes in human neural patterns over time. Extended combat service literally rewires the human brain. They become more efficient at processing moral conflict, but they also become increasingly isolated from normal emotional experiences. Captain Sora walked into the chamber at that moment. She had just returned from a solo mission in the Vega system, and she looked exhausted. Her uniform was clean and her posture was perfect, but her eyes held the weight of recent choices. "Captain Sora," Tae-min said, "the delegates have questions about the human approach to combat operations." Sora looked around the chamber at all, the alien faces watching her. She seemed to consider her words carefully before speaking. "You want to know why humans fight alone?" she said. "The simple answer is that we fight alone because we have to. Not because we're better than you, but because we're different from you in ways that matter." She moved to the center of the chamber, standing where the holographic display had been. "Every species in this room has something beautiful that war would destroy. The Velkari have their love of knowledge and analysis. The Altarans have their honor and nobility. The Kreks have their simple honesty and direct emotions. The Hydros have their deep empathy and connection to life." She paused, looking at each delegate in turn. "Humans had those things too once, but we learned to set them aside when necessary. We learned to be practical instead of noble, efficient instead of honorable, cold instead of empathetic." Ambassador Rixtal leaned forward. "You speak as if this was a choice, as if humans decided to become what you are." Sora smiled, but it was a sad smile. "In a way, it was a choice. Every time a human soldier makes a hard decision, we choose practicality over principle. Every time we accept necessary casualties, we choose effectiveness over emotion. Every time we prioritize mission success over personal relationships, we choose isolation over connection." She gestured to the empty holographic display area. "You asked why humans are allowed to operate unescorted in war zones. The real question is, why are humans willing to operate unescorted in war zones?" Prince Valdris stood up again. "And the answer? Because someone has to," Sora replied simply. "Someone has to make the choices that keep the galaxy safe. Someone has to carry the weight of necessary evils. Someone has to be practical when everyone else can afford to be principled." Dr. Haywan's hologram spoke up. "My research shows that humans don't volunteer for this burden because they enjoy it. They accept it because they recognize that other species would be destroyed by it." She displayed a new set of data. "I have interviewed hundreds of human combat veterans. 97% report that they would prefer to live in a galaxy where their skills were not needed. But they also report that they would rather bear this burden themselves than watch other species become what war requires them to become." The chamber fell silent. The weight of understanding settled over the alien delegates like a heavy blanket. Finally, Gorthak spoke up. "Humans sacrifice self to protect others, not just bodies, but souls?" "In a way, yes," Sora confirmed. "We compartmentalize the darkness so that others can remain in the light. We make the hard choices so that others can keep their innocence. We become efficient killers so that others can remain honorable warriors." Lieutenant Sung Ho entered the chamber at that moment. He was young, maybe 22, and this was his first assignment to an unescorted deployment. He carried his equipment, bag over his shoulder, and moved with the quiet confidence of someone trained for violence. "Lieutenant?" Tae-min called to him. You're deploying to the Rigel system tomorrow, solo reconnaissance in a disputed zone. How do you feel about operating without backup? Sung-Ho set down his bag and looked around at all the faces watching. Him. It's what I trained for, sir. Someone needs to gather intelligence on the situation there, and joint operations would be too slow and too visible. Aren't you concerned about the isolation? Dr. Haywan asked. About making tactical decisions without consultation? Sung-Ho considered the question seriously. I'm more concerned about the consequences of not gathering that intelligence, Doctor. If there's a threat in the Rigel system, better that one human deals with it than risk exposing an entire joint force to unnecessary danger. Ambassador Reddit-style studied the young human carefully. Lieutenant, do you understand what you are volunteering for? The psychological cost of operating alone in combat situations? Yes, sir, Sung-Ho replied without hesitation. But I also understand. The cost of not volunteering. Other species would be hurt by the things I might have to do out there. It's better if I carry that burden alone. The alien delegates exchanged glances. Here was a young human, barely more than a child by some species standards, calmly accepting a psychological burden that would destroy most adult members of their races. This is why Protocol 447B exists, Admiral Taman said quietly. Not because humans are superior, but because humans are willing to become what the galaxy needs them to become. He looked around the chamber one final time. The protocol protects other species from having to make choices that would change who they are at their core. It protects the Velkari from becoming cynical, the Alterans from becoming dishonorable, the Kreks from becoming uncontrolled, and the Hydros from becoming callous. Captain Sora picked up her equipment and prepared to leave. You asked why humans are the only species allowed to walk alone in war zones. Now you know. We walk alone so that others can walk together. We carry the darkness so that others can remain in the light. We make the hard choices so that others never have to. As she reached the door, Ambassador Reddit-style called out to her. Captain, is there anything we can do? Any way we can help share this burden? Sora stopped and turned back to face the chamber. For a moment, her professional mask slipped, and the aliens could see the weight she carried. You can remember that. When humans make choices that seem cold or harsh, we're not doing it because we don't care. We're doing it because we care too much to let others carry this weight. The session ended with a unanimous vote to maintain Protocol 447B. But now it was understood as an act of compassion rather than discrimination. The final words were spoken by Ambassador Reddit-style as the delegates prepared to leave. We asked why. Only humans are allowed to walk alone in war zones. Now we understand.